Hey, honey, Day. This is Toksa Hour. I am Maggie Ross, and I'm live, late but live, from Porcupine, South Dakota, along the Porcupine Creeks where the porcupines roam. Apologies. I was on a plane, or I was sitting at an airport last week, and I totally I didn't tell anybody that there wouldn't be a Toksa Hour because I'm on a plane. So anyways, I apologize for those of you who are tuning in or waiting for me to get it together. Anyways, so we're here and a lot's been kind of going on. I think there's been, news is pretty, they talked about Trump yesterday, like he had is it yesterday or his correspondence dinner, and then there was some kind of assassination attempt, but he's fine. And I think that's probably a ploy. My own opinion. I just don't trust anything about Trump or media anymore. So there's probably a ploy to try to get him some sympathy, support or something, like the shooting of the ear that everybody says was fake and in Pennsylvania. So yeah, that happened, and I don't know. It's kind of, I don't know. Trump, he needs to go away. That's my personal opinion about that. I don't know if it's professional, but it's a personal opinion. So there's quite a bit of things going on, excuse me, in education. So we see or we're notified that Trump is planning this big cut for education, for all education, specifically going to be affecting us as tribal nations. So tribal colleges and universities, the TCUs, are going to be affected, and schools. So one of the bigger things where Trump is trying to dismantle the Department of Education, and we start to look at that process of where do we go? So tribal colleges would probably go under the department or the BIE. And the BIE is already they foiled the whole No Child Left Behind. Like they were so incompetent, the BIE, about their practices with No Child Left Behind. They didn't even bother. They didn't bother to try to be to protect tribal sovereignty at all. Like the BIE, all they did was said, go follow what the states are doing. And then the states just did whatever they wanted to do. And so for the people like in the state of South Dakota, where we are not a public law 280 state, 270, 280, anyways, my brain. Anyways, we're not one of those. And so you think about what the ramifications of that would be. And what happens then when we push everybody into following the state regs? Well, then we lose our identity, we lose our voice, we lose our sovereignty, because then we're not able to come up with our own ways. If there is a group of Native educators, Lakota and Dakota, that have been working through the tribes to create standards, to create things for their own tribes, but some places they don't even have control over any kind of tribal schools, or they might only have one tribal school, and then the public school is spread out throughout their reservation. So here on the Pine Ridge, we have the Shannon County School District, we have the Bennett County School District, and then there's the Jackson County School District. So we have those. And then we have our tribal schools, which would be Porcupine Day School, or American Horse. Let's see, it's Pahe Sinte o Iowa now. American Horse. And I can't remember if they go by Mila Hunska Iowa. And then there's Crazy Horse. and Kyle, Little Wounded, I think they were changing, um, anyways, and Loneman and Manderson, so Wounded Knee District School. So there's 6 tribal schools on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And then there's, the public school. So just Shannon County or Oglala Lakota County in itself has Rocky Ford, Batesland, Wolf Creek, Red Shirt, and then they have Tech. So they have 5 schools and a virtual high school, so 6 schools. So they have 6 schools that they operate on the Pine Ridge, and those are all state, enforcement, state standards. And then you have the BIE has 1 school, which is Pine Ridge Elementary, Middle School, and High School. So that's 3 schools, I guess. And then you have Red Cloud, which is Makbia Luta, and they have the elementary, they have the middle school, they have the high school, and they have Our Lady of Lourdes. So that's 4 schools that the Catholic Church operates. And then we also have Waldorf, which is a K-5 school, I believe, and private. And then we have a girls' school, which is like a middle school, high school, which is right down the road here from me. And they're private. They're like a real private. They're not religious private. They're a private girls' school. So we have those kind of dynamics on the Pine Ridge, and all the other reservations have similar dynamics when it comes to education. And so when No Child Left Behind was in effect, there was just a lot of conformity, my way or the highway. Superintendents came in. Direct instruction was really highly pushed, and direct instruction has when you're doing direct instruction is tied to like new learning. So when you're going to have something new, then you do direct instruction to introduce it, to explain it, and so forth. But one of the things in direct instruction that happened was like they took away thought or think time. And so everything was like based off the Washichu time. So you should be able to have a response because they base competency on response rate. So you should be able to respond like that. Ask the question, have an answer like that. There's nothing like if they ask a question that you need to think about before you answer, there's no wait time. There was no wait time. And so then you just had to move on. And so you'd see that happening over and over where maybe a student would have a response and then the teacher would be forced to say, well, we're already moved over here, that it's, they dismiss the response or any discussion on the response. And so that played out for a long time in education and K-12 education. And that's the failure of the BIE. The BIE just wanted to say, dude, pay us the big bucks, but just do whatever the state's doing. We're very fortunate during some of the No Child Left Behind times that we had Senator Rounds for the state of South Dakota. He used to be the governor, so he was Governor Rounds. And so we were very fortunate to have him be our governor because he then was able to he pushed for how would you say that voice, right? He started to change. He made legislation for the Indian Education Act for the state. It didn't have a lot of funding attached to it, but there was incentives and initiatives that brought Native people, Lakota people, Dakota people to the table. So bring them to the table to have the conversation about what education should look like for tribal nations. We don't want to just be in this full-fledged assimilation process. So we move that conversation, but then Kristi Noem comes into power and she just wipes all of that hard work. She just takes it all out. And so where there used to be an Indian Education Office with the Department of Education with the state of South Dakota, well, that's no more. She moved that back over to be with the it's just a political position. and it's just under tribal government. And so it's like really all of the hard work that was put into place, she undid it. And now when you see like what she's really about and all of her racism and all of that, it's like, oh yeah, well, we knew, so in the rest of the world, like state of South Dakota is like, we knew she was racist, we knew she was a bigot. We knew all of those things because of her policies and the things that she was doing. The escalation of surveillance in the state of South Dakota as well. So who is being surveilled? Like if you went up to Rapid City, you're not going to see a bunch of police officers with their surveillance equipment and all of that over there at Canyon Lake Park in Rapid City. Over in the west side of Rapid City, where the more rich people live, are up there on surveilling the millionaires that are building houses up on Skyline Drive. You're not going to see that there, but you're going to see all of that surveillance focused in North Rapid. And it's right around the place where they call the Woods. So that's all purpose, and out to Lakota Homes, that's all purpose, to create surveillance, tracking, and to know all of our every moves. But we don't do enough. I believe we do not do enough conversation in regards to the surveillance that is taking place. So on Toksa Hour, we've been talking for a very long time about the police state. We've been talking about Israel and how Israel is the place. The Palestinians are the guinea pigs. So whenever a Palestinian is murdered, assassinated, they know exactly where every Palestinian is. So they know who they're looking for, and they know. So when they just drop a bomb and take out a whole apartment, they don't care if they take out families. They don't care about any of that, because it's our phones, on our phones. They're made in China, but the CIA makes sure that there's certain chips within our phone that tracks us and gives information. And so we all might think, oh, it's harmless. I'm not a criminal. I don't do anything that warrants anything. But you don't know, as we're passive about that, they start to compile all of this information and all of this data on us based off of our phones, the apps we use. And then, we're so willing to share out our location. So you might be on Facebook and say, doing the check-in thing. All those things are cool, right? Check in while they're monitoring you. They're able to track you. And so eventually the tracking can be done like you're tied in with your employer, tied in, so it's just like there's things that are happening that we're not paying attention to because we're really addicted to our phones, and we're really addicted to our apps, and we're really addicted to these things that we don't see the harm and danger that is happening with them. I used to do this when I would go visiting. This is pre-COVID. I would leave my phone in my car, and I would go in and visit just because I wanted to give my full attention to the person I went to go visit. And so I would just leave my phone in the car, and people would get mad at me, like, answer your phone. Why did you, And I said, oh, I left it in the car. I went to go, I was visiting. And so people would get mad at me about that. But now I'm almost to that point where I just want to leave my phone at home when I go somewhere, because they're tracking everything, even your digital purchase. They can track that and pull it, what you're purchasing, where you're purchasing at, where were you. And so then I started try to pay more in cash, utilizing cash versus the debit card. So there's just little ways that I in my protest, I guess I should say, in my defiance, something like that. I create things. I do things just intentionally to maybe throw it off or whatever, because I don't know. I don't want them following me. I don't want them tracking me. I don't know what I'm doing out there in the world. Used against me later, like and then there's a lot of surveillance also that just has audio, so it can capture your audio, all of this stuff. Our phones record us. So I had no intentions of really talking about the surveillance stuff this morning, so I apologize. I wanted to really just kind of talk about the education things that are going on. And so, um, so as we think about what's happening with education, and we see the failure of No Child Left Behind, that has kind of gone up into the into colleges and universities. So we have a programming called the for most tribal colleges, they're usually going through Higher Learning Commission. And so right now, the Higher Learning Commission is pretty, they're not like dead set boundary things like you have to teach it this way, you have to be Washichu, you have to, mindsets, they're not like that. But with them removing and then taking our colleges and saying, we're gonna, we're dismantling the Department of Education. So we then Indian education falls back under the BIE. Well, the BIE, as I was saying earlier, just foiled the whole process for sovereignty. They took part in removing our sovereignty. It's like, yeah, that's true, and we would expect that to be them because they're not about our sovereignty. The BIE, the Bureau of Indian Education, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, they are not about tribal sovereignty. They are not about any of that. They are about assimilation or termination. So those are the two things that BIE, BIA is about. And any Native working in those organizations want to have a conversation and debate me about it, I'd be more than happy to do that, because they're not about sovereignty. They're about assimilation, acculturation, and giving up our sovereignty. That's always been the goal for them. Doesn't matter what Indian they put into those positions. It does not matter, because you're still working for the federal government and you're following their initiative and impact. And right now it's Donald Trump. So Donald Trump is anti everybody, right? He's only pro billionaire class. That's the only thing Donald Trump cares about. He doesn't care about the rest of us. And so when we talk about that, what he cares about, or what he is willing to excuse me, what he's willing to compromise on is just on cutting money. I mean, he's not willing. He'll compromise on which billionaire class gets it, I guess is what I want to say. That's where his negotiations are. Is it Peter Thiel, or is it Meta, or who's the organization that gets it? That's probably the only thing he wants to negotiate on. He doesn't care about your rights. He doesn't care about my rights. He doesn't care about anybody's rights except for the billionaire class. And those are all my opinions, and I stand behind every one of them. It's like, because that's you look at the record and you look at what's happening, and then you can see it. So we know that this is his we know that's his MO, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So one of the things then that we look at is, well, what happens then? So what happens for tribal colleges? What's going to happen for tribal colleges? And so we should be very concerned about that, because we have with tribal colleges, we have this tribal colleges were created as a part of the movement of tribal sovereignty. And so when we think about that, like what is it that we're um, the programming and all of those things that come through tribal colleges are what is going to be effective. And then the funding. And so one of the things, that changes is just the dynamic. So we're going to have to go back to the BIE who didn't even protect us when we were doing K-12 education. And then it's the whole gamut of the BIE to do this. And we don't know what they're doing. And so we end up in a place like where tribal sovereignty, if there's anything left of it, starts to really be dwindled again, because I don't know. I don't even know, like, for people where they are in their concerns for education. There's, like, we are not, South Dakota is not a public law 280 state. We are not a public law 280 state. And so when we start going into agreements with the state over policing, then we're starting to give up our sovereignty. And we give up our sovereignty because we say we don't have enough law enforcement. And so then it creates this problem because we have all this crime going on. But the crime is actually coming and being sponsored and filtered by outside entities, right? So you have the CIA, you have the FBI themselves, because they're trying to build what do they call those, conspiracy cases. So they'll have their own informants, they'll have their own players in place that are trying to make things happen so that they can go after the big person in Mexico or wherever they are. But they don't go after the big person in Washington, D.C. or the billionaire class, who also, like, when you look at the opiate crisis, there were some things that were coming out about the opiate crisis, where the opiate or the poppy fields in Iran. So when there was the Iraq war, there is this conversation that's emerging that is saying that American troops were not even about the oil. They were about these poppy fields, and that's what they were protecting, were these poppy fields. And once the poppy fields were harvested or whatever, and then it just, went away. And so the opiate epidemic arose after that. And so you think about all of these things and about how the federal government in itself is keeping us addicted to the billionaire class. So if we are addicted, then we are more easily able to manage and control. And so it goes back to the whole surveillance thing. And it also goes back to education. And so if they're able to dummy us down to 6th grade level, and that we never, get above that. And so if you go and you look, and they talk about, like, newspapers are written at the 6th grade level. And then there's these things that they do for testing, where testing can predict. It gives predictive behavior, and the federal government denied it for a long time. But now, like, when you understand what predictive behavior is, and you understand what how, like, Palantir is going to work by going and gathering information and doing all of this stuff, taking our data, our education data. And so I've been in this big concern about it for K-12 education. Like, what are we doing with our data, and who's protecting our data? Because, like, we have to give our data to the state, and this state of South Dakota is not even about protecting us. They're about protecting Israel. They're about billionaires. They're about all of these things. They're not about the common person. None of them are. And so when we think about the funding and all of those things coming, like, it's, the whole, even though I I saw my cousin yesterday, and I was talking to her about her dad, and I said, "There's a video of your dad, Russell Means. There's a video of your dad, and he's talking at the Senate, and he's talking." I said, I was looking for the whole video because it's all like spliced in YouTube, but the whole video, because in it he's talking about the millions of dollars that come to the state of South Dakota in regards to tribal people. And so then he was talking about that, like they all come, but none of that falls on the reservations because all of these outside people get the money. And so you look at the curriculum people, you look at all those people, you look at them, and then they're the ones that benefit. And so then what we get is that trickle down effect of nothing, nothing trickles down to us. And so our education systems are poor. Nobody's investing into our communities, but you can't invest into our communities because the DIA has such a tight hold on our infrastructure and our land base. And so, and then the tribe never doesn't, our tribes more than often don't do anything that is impactful, and we don't trust them. So there's a lot of things that happen between the tribal council and the people they serve. And so that becomes an issue. And so when we think about what's happening in education, then it's just like it's either at some point, but people don't want to do that either. I've been an advocate and I've been speaking up on things for many years now. Many of you know that Toksa Hour was born in 2020, but long before 2020, I was doing things that try to advocate for people or change of rules or all of that. So that's what I try to do. And so I've been doing that for a very long time. And the amount, people will come and talk to me about something and then leave it with me. Like they want me to do it, me to speak on it, to talk about it to somebody else. Because people are afraid you're going to lose your job, you're going to lose your whatevers, you're going to lose something in the process of speaking up. And so then it usually falls on other people to speak up. And then those people become the brunt, the attacks. All of that happens to those people who speak up for change. And and just as we see like the unfolding of all of this Epstein stuff, we can, you could make comparisons to that in tribal governments. You can see how drugs are affiliated to our councils, to our leaders, how they're positioned within our communities. And you can see all of that. Like in the 90s, it was the gang violence was a big thing. We had tribal people that went to federal prison who learned the gang culture in prison and then brought those back to our reservation. And so then I think Trey was one of the gangs. And then we had the Nomads. So those were the two big ones. And then out of Rapid City, we had the Boys. So those were the big, in our area anyways, the big influential gangs. And then everybody else started developing their own gangs. And so then we have hundreds of gangs on gang culture life on the reservation and all reservations. Everybody's trying to find a place. And so what they're looking for is what we're missing, through the process of assimilation. They're looking for family, all of that. And so in gang life, what they say is join us, be with us, we'll protect you. You'll be our family. We'll be your family. We'll take care of you. And so it builds that criminal element. And so that's what we're in that place. So before, like I remember, like if you wore red or blue, they would target that. I think they still do. If you're putting it in one side or the other side, rolling up one pants leg versus the other one, or there's all the things that they used to know was gang affiliation. And so the gangs got a lot smarter and how they can conceal, but that they're still what they are. And so we have that problem still continuing. So as our education system is in decline, all of this criminal element is growing. And then people become afraid to speak out. So, just examples of that coming out of like Evergreen, there was a lot of stuff going on, but people were afraid to speak out because then they would come and torment you. And then you put yourself in that harm's way. So then we're all learning to just shut our curtains and lock our doors and don't look. Because if you look and you see it and you have to report, then there's something going on. And then we see where that whole mentality also infiltrated into our ceremonial circles where you go to pray at. And so the churches, like the collapse of the churches on the Pine Ridge anyways, had to do with like nobody coming out in the community and talking and engaging. So you'd go to church, but then that was kind of it. Like the culture of the church life changed in the 90s. So in the 80s, it was still, you still could go to your church and you still had church, and then maybe you might have like a dinner or whatever, bruncheon or luncheon or whatever they call those after, so you'd still have that. And then you'd go on about your business and you had full access to your priest and, all of that. But that changed. The church decided like they weren't going to do that anymore. And so the decline of the churches, and it wasn't just Catholic church, everywhere there's the decline of the churches. And so then the rise of Lakota spirituality starts to emerge through. But as it's emerging through, what the criminal element did was they saw that the power of what was happening in the resurgence of Lakota identity and Lakota spirituality, they could see that. They could see the power of it. And so in order to get into that and then start the corruption of our spirituality. And so that's where we're at. Like we actively see those things in our community and we understand it. And it's like, so like now it's like to be Lakota, you kind of keep that to yourself and you try to remain in a small, safe circle versus going into those great, big, large circles where there's, things going on that are dangerous, harmful, and criminal. So that's, some of those things. And it really is it's difficult because when we have to talk about these things actively and openly, then it's also is harmful because people want to say things about it. And they want to make it look like you are bitter, right? So then they give you the bitter, and then they also can turn those massive circles into political places. And so then you see how they're able to manipulate elections through that process of getting everybody to vote, so whoever is at the center of the circle is able to tell people you need to go vote for this person or that person, or, so then the power and the shifts take place. And so it's really a very, I don't know, it's disturbing and it's really sad, really sad that that's happened. But how that all affects us in education is, again, we're so busy and we become distracted and all of this other stuff going on that they get to just walk away with the money. So Trump and his people are like hundreds of billions of dollars, right? They're getting away with because we're all in this descent. And so nobody's seeing it. And then when they do see it, then we don't say anything. And then you have to start looking at our local politicians, like how involved are you in that? And I think just that whole thought of APAC, like what APAC is doing and their involvement in it, like we see that happening. I see that. I can make the parallels to how that is happening on our reservations and the influence. Like I had when October 7th happened, and I was just listening and reading people's points of views about what was going on with Palestine and Israel, and to watch a lot of Native people, like there's some people up in Canada and there's some people in Alaska, Native peoples that were coming out in support of Israel. And so then I was asking why, and then they want to argue. I have some relatives that are very strong Israel people. They have friends that are from Israel, and they believe in that. They're military people, so they believe in it, that Israel is the good guy here. And then they blame Hamas and they blame the Palestinians, for all of this stuff. And it's just like, you look at that and you think anybody with um, brain can see it. Anybody, can see that there's problems with that whole narrative. And then now it's all propaganda. Israel is like Palestinians now have more support, American support and world support in bullying than Israel. So Israel is in the plummeting, but we're still fighting for Israel and we're still going to war. And so $200 billion, just a trillion, $200 billion just went to Israel again, middle of the night vote. And so then they're cutting education, cutting healthcare, cutting all the services that we would need to go fight a war that we don't need. And then you see so many people like they're creating these narratives about it being a religious war and all of that. And so it's really just taking the time to do your own research, to listen and to see, what's the truth, because there are people out there that know and they do reporting on it. And I read a lot of stuff, about what is happening. So they, for example, they say that the Jewish people say that the Messiah or the messenger will come and basically bring the end of the world, will unalive everybody that isn't Jewish, because the Jewish people are are privileged to live. And then the Christian people are saying so then they call them the Christian Judea or something like that belief system. And then they say what they believe is that Christ will be reborn and he will come and he will kill all the Jewish people. But we're Christian Judea or whatever, like we're believing in this stuff, but deep down secretly we're only supporting you guys because we know Jesus is going to come and kill you. That's, that mindset. And then they say that Russia is involved because of the Orthodox Church. And so that Russia is considered the third church. So, like how they have the Roman Catholic Church, then there's the Orthodox Church. And so these guys are going to get involved because then they are going to win. So it's like even that, Christian against Christian. And then they say that the Iranian people are getting involved in it because in the Muslim belief, there's the Imam, and the Imam is going to come and take out everybody. So they frame this all up as a religious thing, make us all fearful of each other. And it's really crazy because you see a lot of it. You see a lot of this stuff in the social media posts and things where people are really framing those things up. And then here's us, simple Lakota people, all the indigenous people of America, we're all just checking them out. Like, we don't have those gods. I don't know, we don't believe in those things. So I guess, our cultures are more about peace and, like we find ways to bring peace amongst each other, to have relatives and be good relatives versus destroying the world to rule it, So there's all of that happening. And we are the ones that are the most harmed by it because of the situation, us and the Palestinians, now the Lebanese and the African people, because as indigenous peoples, it is our land, it is our understandings, that get taken and the narratives get repainted and retold. The story is retold about who we are and how we come to be. And like now, like the those Polish people that are over there in Israel claiming that land as theirs, they're from Poland, they're from Ukraine, they're from Czechoslovakia, they're from over there. They adopted the religion and then now they move it over there and act like they were born of that land and all of that stuff. And then trying to, they're just squatters. We have that experience over here, how they discredit us as Lakota people or as Indigenous people by saying, oh, 30,000 years ago, you guys came across these Bering Straits. These lands are not yours. All those things to try to discredit us. And then it's like, well, where did you come from? Shut up, go back. Shoot. Anyway, so I just wanted to this morning just kind of have that education conversation. So many of you are parents and grandparents and students, like, so what do you do or how do you deal with these things? Like how do you make sure that you are not being spoon-fed propaganda? Those are the things that we have to ask because Robert, what was his name? Ghislaine. Anyways, what was her name? The Epstein lady, Ghislaine Maxwell. So her father is Robert Maxwell, and he is a Mossad agent. He was a Mossad agent. He came to the United States and created different operations. But one of the things that he did was bought up textbook companies. And so that narrative, our narratives, like what is in textbooks, we have to question because they may not be accurate or they're told in a way to manipulate us or indoctrinate us. And so when people talk about indoctrination, like those MAGA people, they're so far indoctrinated that they believe in what that is, and then the other side is indoctrinated as well. So the indoctrination is occurring on both sides, and it's forcing us to believe that Israel is first. Israel is right, and so we should question that, and we should be making sure that our stories are preserved and told. So we need to get back on track with those things and making the good fight about education and advocating the change. So thank you guys for joining. I apologize. Last week I went to Chicago. That's where I went. I went to Chicago, and I took my mom's pin, so she went to Chicago with me. My mother she was relocated. Her and my dad, they were married and got relocated to Chicago and went to school over there. And my oldest brother was born there. And so my mom would always talk about the L train, riding the L train. And so then that kind of going to Chicago with my mom, that's what I did. And yeah, it was a good experience over there. It felt like I was over there for a very long time, but I was only over there for 2 days. But it felt like a very long time I was over there. It's really weird. Anyways, so thank you guys for watching. I'd appreciate it if you liked, if you shared, and if you followed. I greatly appreciate you guys and all of your sticking it out with me as I rebuild this platform and try to grow Toksa Hour. And so with that, you guys have a good rest of your week. Earth Day was Wednesday, I believe. Everybody was out cleaning up Uchimaka, so we should do that every day. Be our best. The birds are singing like crazy outside and we have rain. So I'm hoping that we get more rain. That would be super great to have a lot of rain. So with that, you guys have a good rest of your day. Be safe, and I will see you next week. I think Chaz will be joining back on, and we'll have another conversation. So